So I read a post this morning about a guy talking about how he'd lost in life. He's a 20-year-old male, and he's overweight, and he's sort of been applying for jobs and such. But one of the things he says really resonated with me, and this was that. But I'm also having the mindset of I'm unlovable. I need to be the best version of myself before I find someone. Now, for reference, he was talking about how he wants to be in a relationship and such, but he just doesn't feel good enough for it. And honestly speaking, like, I think a lot of the advice that you often hear about this is, oh no, you are good enough, and so on and so forth. But what I've noticed that as a guy, the love that you get is conditional, right? Like, as in, you have to provide something in order to be loved, other than perhaps if you're loved by your mother or something, right? Because I find that, women and children are often loved unconditionally. They don't really need to do much in order to get love. But I think as a guy, I'm noticing that the majority speaking, it is conditional. And so, you might often hear the whole thing of, you need to work on yourself, right? And I believe that is true, right? I believe that it is important to work on yourself as a guy. Now, obviously you can have your own opinions about things in terms of relationships and so on and so forth. For me, I believe at the moment that at this period in time, I don't have the things I want in order to be able to provide. AKA, I don't really want to be getting into, a relationship at this moment because I just don't really feel like I have the things that I want to have at the moment and the things that perhaps women might value at the moment. And that's just that. But obviously for me, it's like, well, I'm pretty young as well, right? Like I've obviously got a lot to still do. And so, when obviously this guy is saying, like the whole mindset of I'm unlovable, I need to be the best version of myself before I find someone, I don't particularly think that that is all bad. And I wouldn't even say that is wrong. I think it depends on the person, right? Because I know for me, like as I said before, I think at the moment, like I can almost use that sort of feeling as a driver forward, right? As a driver towards whatever that I'm working on. Now, I do think that this can get pretty bad, where if you don't actually have something you're genuinely working towards or things that you want to do, I believe this can get a bit just sort of messy in the sense that you just fall into this constant, feeling bad and pity on yourself sort of thing without actually going anywhere. But at the same time, I don't think it's a bad idea to necessarily think this way. I don't think it's a bad idea to necessarily think, because effectively the way I see this is that, look, if you are a guy and you're genuinely honest with yourself, you might actually think that, look, I don't actually have the things I want at the moment. I don't have perhaps the things which I value that other people will value. I don't really perhaps provide as much as I want to. And I think that's okay, right? I think that's a good realization. And if that's the realization that perhaps you have, then I think from there, instead of getting, all emotional and sort of, like worried about it, I think then from there it's, use that energy, use perhaps that frustration, and then put it towards something that you want to do. Because I think like so many of us guys have a lot of energy, we're just not directing it anywhere, right? And I think as a guy, if you don't direct your energy to the right places, things can just get really messy and out of hand, right? Where you just start like wasting loads of time, right? And I think that's the important thing is like being able to, for example, detach away from all of the stimulation and consuming content and scrolling and stuff, and then putting your energy towards things which are going to start, building you up. So in my case, I'm obviously recording videos like this, but I'm also trying to develop video games as well, right? And my goal is that I'm just putting my energy into that, and then eventually it will actually work out and I'll be making money from both of them. That's sort of my plan at the moment, and I'm just putting energy into that. Now, in terms of, like perhaps when guys may feel like they're gonna feel loved or perhaps your self-worth, like I said before, I believe as guys, the value or, our sort of value and the love that we can get is conditional, right? I believe that we need to be able to provide something and improve others' lives, or just, yeah, effectively make lives for others easier and more beneficial in order to get some of that sort of love and stuff like that. And I think as a guy, like, we want to be able to provide something, right? We want to be able to actually make other people's lives better. We want other people to be able to count on us. So if you're a guy, in your sort of 20s, or just, in your early stages, I think, if you're like feeling this way, I think that's okay, right? I think it's okay. I think it's more so what you actually look to do with this, right? Because there's plenty of guys that can feel this way and can just, get all just sort of upset and not really do anything. But what I'm doing at the moment is using that energy and directing it to the places where I want to, right? To the places where I know where I want to go, and it gives me a sense of direction. And eventually, whenever this will be, I will feel like I'm in a better situation, right? More, for example, financially, in which in that position, then I'll be able to better provide for myself, but even for those I love as well. So hopefully you found this video useful. If you do relate with this, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. But that said, make sure you keep working at it, and I'll chat soon.